Lativola here, and I'm back with the next installment of What Would Kelly Make? And today we're going to be talking about ink smooshing. So that's how I created the background for all 4 of these cards. This is the full card video, which is clearly a little bit longer. I'm going to be using the Timeless Tags 2 from W+9, Garden Buddies with the dies, and the Get Well Gang also with the dies. So we're just going to jump right into the technique. I have laid out a rainbow of Distress Oxides because I'm making a couple of different backgrounds, but also because rainbows are pretty. You're going to need a piece of acetate. If you don't have just a piece laying around, just pull it off the back of your stamp set. You can totally use your product packaging for this technique. I'm working on a Ranger craft mat, and I'm just going to smush down my ink. I'm going to spray it twice with my mister, and then I'm going to pick that ink up with the acetate. The reason... I mean, besides the fact that it looks cool, the reason that I like this technique is because it gives you so much more control over where the color goes. So in between each color, I am wiping off my craft mat and wiping off that sheet of acetate. I'm not going to show it to you every time because this video is clearly already very long. So, the first thing is you can put 2 colors down while the first one is wet. That will encourage your colors to blend together. So here I have the fossilized amber, and then I'm using the peacock feathers, and that's giving me like a fun kind of neon green color. I'm also going to add in some salty ocean, but you don't necessarily have to do it while it is wet. We're making several backgrounds here, so we'll talk about that when we get to it. But here I'm basically just kind of picking up the color where I want, picking up the color on the acetate sheet and then putting it down where I want. If I don't like where something landed, I just kind of move it around with that little acetate sheet. For those of you who don't like messy techniques, this one is pretty clean. I'm going to go ahead and dry this one down. This one does not have a lot of moisture on it. It's very kind of splotchy. I am using Distress Oxides, and one of the benefits of Distress Oxides is that you can put a lighter color over a darker color. So I'm able to go back in with that yellow and put it on top of the teal, and it's not a problem. I also like to kind of break up the color sometimes if I have a lot on my paper. And so I'm doing that with just like the tubing from my mister. I'm going to let it sit for a minute, and then I'm going to blot it up. Speaking of paper, I am working on Canson watercolor paper. This works best on watercolor paper. I'm not saying that you can't do it on regular paper. You're just not going to get great results. So we're just jumping right into the next background. I did want to mention I'm using Distress Oxides. I've also done with this Distress Inks, but you can do this with pretty much any water-based coloring medium. So if you have like Tombow markers or other water-based markers, you could scribble them down on your craft mat, spray them, pick them up, and do the same exact thing. Here, with this background, I started with the Salty Ocean, and then I added the Candied Apple. I don't like it. I'm going to keep playing with it because this is one of those techniques you can kind of build on. I tried to add some purple in to kind of brighten it up, but to me that Candied Apple just looked a little bit muddy, and I didn't really love that. But again, everything is fixable, so hang tight because we are going to fix it. I'm going to dry this down. And again, because I'm using those Distress Oxides, I can put one color over another and have it show up. So now I'm going to go in with the picked raspberry, and I'm going to put that right over the area that I had the candy apple in to kind of brighten it up, add in that pink color. And I was absolutely able to salvage this piece and come up with something that I really loved just by adding that pink on top. I did use the corner of the acetate sheet to kind of drag it along the same lines that the candied apple was. I'm going to add in some more of that purple just so that it's kind of bright now that everything is dry. I really like drying down at least one time and then going back and adding more colors. For this one, I did feel like I lost a little bit of that salty ocean, so I am going to do that one just one last time so that there is some blue showing through because blue is my favorite color. So once I was happy with that, I set that one aside to dry, and now we're going to talk about mixing colors that maybe you wouldn't normally mix. So I'm going to do a green, pink, and yellow background for this one. Now you might be thinking, pink and green, you're going to get brown. Yes, but there's a way to do it. So first of all, I put down a neutral color that both of them mix really well with, yellow. I love pink and yellow together. I love green and yellow together. And so in between the pink and the green. So the yellow is still wet when I put down the pink, but I did let them dry a little bit before I started going in with the green, which this is Twisted Citron. I'm not so much concerned about the yellow, which is why I'm staying on the left-hand side, where it's still kind of wet over there. So I could get the green to kind of mix with the yellow, but I don't really want it mixing with my pink because I don't want brown. In order to get a little bit more bold color, because I do love bright colors, I am going to dry it down and then go back in and add in some Lucky Clover. And here you can see I put that green right on top of the pink, and I'm not worried about it because I've dried it down. So they're not going to mix. The green will sit on top of the pink, and it will be super beautiful together because pink and green are complementary colors. So I'm going to go back in and add in a little bit of yellow. And then again, because I like bold color, I'm going to add in a little bit more pink just so I have some kind of splotches of that hot pink color. This, you can do it as dark or as light as you prefer, or whatever project you're working on. If you want lighter color, use more water. You want darker color, use less water. So these are the 4 backgrounds. I created 3 here on this video. One of them I used for the technique video. So if you would like to see this particular one, please go check out the technique video. Here I have my mini Misty. I have all of my stamps lined up. Since I am making multiples, I'm going to go ahead and stamp in Intense Black ink from Simon Says Stamp because it is Copic safe. So I'm going to ink up all these little guys, stamp them down. I actually ended up stamping 2 so that I would have enough little characters for my 4 cards. And then we're going to get into the Copic coloring. You are going to notice with the Copic coloring that it is sped up. The reason it's sped up is because I colored 7, 8, 9 images to go for these 4 cards. And ultimately the goal of this video is to talk to you about ink smooshing. I really love being able to show you guys the whole card because when I watch a video, I want to see the whole card. Nothing is more upsetting to me than I see a card that I really, really love, and then I go to watch the video and the part that I wanted to know how they did is missing. So I would rather include it speeded up than not include it at all. But anyway, so we're coloring their skin tones. For the little girl on the right, her shadows are basically going to be the same as everybody else's. They're all going to have a little bit of shadow around their face, but the bangs in particular, there'll be a shadow underneath that. This little girl doesn't have bangs. Her hair's pulled back in a cute little side pony. Hello 80s, you remember cute little side ponies? But anyway, she's still going to have some shading around her hairline that's naturally darker. And I am coloring her with a little bit of a darker skin tone. So more of a maybe Latino skin tone. So she's just a little bit darker. And for the little boy, I'm going to make him a very dark skinned. And I wasn't really pleased with the way that his darker skin came out. But again, everything is fixable. So just hang tight. Even if you don't like the way something comes out at first, we can totally fix it. So here, again, his hair is hanging over his forehead, so there would definitely be some shadows there. For their little hands, I'm really just adding the shadows to the bottom of their hands and then their neck area, which is just like 2 little stripes of color, honestly. So here, once I was done with his face, I wasn't A, loving the way it was blending, and B, I didn't necessarily love how red it was. It could be a beautiful skin tone for a different style of child or person that you're trying to do, but I wanted him to be a little African-American boy, so I felt like his skin tone was too red. That's why I added the E55, so it would add some yellow to it and kind of make it a bit more neutral. For her hair, I'm doing flicks of color. That's how I always color hair. So just using the tip of the marker and very, very light pressure. I'm letting kind of the marker do the work for me. If you find that your flicking strokes are too thick, maybe back up where you're holding the marker at. So you're not just right on top of it. It'll help make your grip a little bit looser. But the little girl with the bangs, her highlight is going to be right across her bangs. So I added shading to the top of her head and then from her bangs toward the back of her head. For this little girl, the highlight's going to be on the left and the right hand side of her head. And Latino, Hair is typically like super shiny and really beautiful, and I'm kind of jealous. So I definitely wanted there to be some white in there to indicate that shine for her. For his hair, we're going to use a lot of cool gray colors, but I did want there to be just a little bit of warmth in there, which is why I brought in the E29. And to do his hair, I wanted him to have curly hair. So I am starting with my lightest color, but you'll see I am going outside of the black line that's drawn. That's kind of key to coloring this style of hair, is to change those lines. So basically going from my lightest out to my darkest, just like I do with everything, and then darkest back out to my lightest. And I'm not really worried about that white. I'm just continually drawing little, like the little curls or little wavy lines. Because his hair is black, I am going to put some black in it. The only thing I will caution you with this technique is if you're using the dyes like I am, it's going to take away a bit of your white border. If that doesn't bother you, then that's totally fine. It didn't bother me any. Moving on to the little puppy here, the little doctor puppy. I thought he would be super cute with just some little white spots, not like full-blown Dalmatian, but just maybe like a little patch. So I am drawing those in, and then I'm filling the rest of him in with my lightest color, which is a C5. I want him to be a little black dog. So just filling in those areas, being careful to avoid the white spots that I've left him. I'm going to add shading up from his muzzle also on the outside, or the inside line of his ears, where they're back behind his head would be darker. Adding some shading to the bottom of his arms, underneath his chin, where his cute little hand is on his hip, and then also to the tops and insides of his legs since he is standing up. And just, again, moving out to my darkest color each time. I'm not necessarily covering up the color before it, but I'm definitely not extending out past what I've already put down. So there, his little, is it a headlamp? I don't even know what you call that, so my bad, I should have looked it up. But there's some shading underneath that, and then a little bit of shading underneath his stethoscope. Wow. Words are hard to pronounce. Underneath his stethoscope on his belly, and then just blending that out. One thing I will note is on his face, like where his actual head is, not his ears. On his face, I left a lighter edge on the outside of his head so that his head didn't completely blend into his ears. Even though his spots are white and so is his little muzzle, it still would have some shading, so I'm putting that in with a C1 and a C3, and then coloring his nose in with the black marker, leaving just a little white highlight. For my little mouse, my little banged up mouse here, I just think this is such a super cute set for like a get well card. Did I use it? I don't think I did use that sentiment, but there's one in there that says, it's a bad case of missing you, which I think is totally adorable to like send to a little friend. But anyway, so his shading is going to be on where his ears meet his head, underneath his bandages, underneath his neck, where his arms are sitting in his lap. There's definitely going to be shadows, and then behind his little feet. I'm using the same cool grays to color up his bandages, but I am not going as dark. And then I'm also going to add in a little bit of pink to his nose, his ears, and his tail. So from there, we're going to move on to the cat. I want the cat to have a little bit of texture or a pattern, because typically most cats do. I decided to make him kind of like a little tiger stripe kitty, but I like to go in first and add in all of the shading I normally would add. So behind his little nose, I'm adding some shading on the left and the right of his ears, on the left and the right of his face, where his arms laying over his belly, on the top and the inside of his leg, and then where his tail meets his body, and then where it kind of curls back, because I want that highlight to be on the rounded part of his tail. So once I was happy with that, I'm going to go in and start drawing his little pattern. He is super cute without the pattern. You do not need to do it. However, it is very easy if you would like to add it. All I'm really doing is just adding some little dots. Now I'm using my darkest color here, the E57, and then I'm going to go back in and blend out over those, doing the same thing with the little dots. These ones are not as connected. They are more traditional stippling, which is shading with dots. I'm going to use that same pink marker to hit up his ear and his nose. I did the bandages the same way as I did the mouse, but I did forget his little leg, so I had to go back in and color that. And then for his crutches are typically like a lighter brown color, but it was really, really blending into his body, so I decided to make it a little bit darker. For the dog at the top, oh, well, let me just mention here, I'm going back in with my colorless blender for this mouse's, I guess, yeah, he's taking ownership. They are his bandages. He owns them, but it sounds so weird not to say mice. Anyway, I don't have plural. I only have one. He owns them. Whatever. Talking about grammar, right? But anyway, I did go back in with the colorless blender just to kind of clean up the lines around his bandages. For this dog, I'm doing the same thing that I did with the cat. I'm putting in all of the regular shading, and then I do want him to have a pattern as well, because I'm trying to make him look like my doggy. So I should be calling it a her because my doggy's name is Molly, and my Molly is a brindle coat. So I am doing the same thing with the stippling, except I'm letting more of those dots connect so that they look a little bit more like stripes, because that is how a brindle coat looks. So I'm working out to my darkest color. I'm not completely covering up the lightest colors, but I'm also going to add in some gray stripes, which I think if you're coloring an animal brindle, that definitely helps. My Molly's face is black. Her snout and behind her eyes is black, and then it fades into a brindle. So I created that same kind of look with the cool gray markers. Don't worry, I'm not going to leave her with no eyes. I'm not going to leave the doctor dog as a pirate. We're going to fix that in the end. Don't sweat it. So moving on to starting now to color their accessories a little bit. I forgot this dog's paw too. See, it was just like crazy. I can't even keep track of all the things that I was trying to color. But anyway, I wanted her to have a cute little purple pillow because you can see maybe like to the right or the left of the animals, I've made a number. This is kind of how I just keep them straight for what background they're going on. So that way I know what color their accessory should be. So for this pillow, it will be darker behind the dog's head. It will also be darker where the dog is laying on it. Those two parts that are kind of like puffed up where the weight is pushing kind of like the stuffing out, those are going to be the lightest areas. While I have my purple marker out, I'm just going to add a little bit of purple to the headlamp and the stethoscope. And then I'm using a lot of purple for this girl's little outfit. So I'm doing her shirt, her pocket, and the trim on her jean dress with that same purple. Again, starting from my lightest, working out to my darkest. I'm not adding a ton of, I guess each color, I'm only adding a little bit because this is such a small area. I probably could have used less than 4 colors, but you just kind of know what you know what I mean? So that's how I went with it. So underneath of her arms, where her shirt is sitting behind her overalls, and then to the bottom of the pocket, the left and the right of the accessories. For the actual jean dress, I'm adding shading to the top of her straps, to the left and the right of her dress, and then to the top of her pocket. The reason to the top of her pocket is because that would be pushed out away from her body. So there would be some shadows behind that. I'm going to blend all of that out and then move on to the other 2 little characters. Now, I already colored his overalls with the navy blue because that's, to me, that B90 series is like the perfect jean color. However, I wanted to show you, you don't have to color them that way. I had a pair, this is so embarrassing. When I was in high school, overalls were a big thing. And I had a pair of corduroy overalls. I mean, I was in high school, people. I was not 6. That were hot pink corduroy overalls. And they were the most comfortable things in the world. And I wore those things like they were my job. And you know what? I guess I'm not even I'm not even going to be embarrassed about it because they were so comfortable. It was like the best test taking outfit. Anywho, so I colored her little overalls green because she is going on the yellow, green, and pink card. For her shirt, the only difference is going to be, it's going to be the same thing with the shading underneath her arms and underneath those overalls, but you want to make sure that you leave that little collar a little bit lighter so it sticks out further than the other parts of her shirt. All the coloring is done. And so I'm going to go back in and add in the little details. You know, that's how I roll. So I did some polka dots on the pillow. I added some highlights to that stethoscope. I'm going to add just some details to their overalls just to make them a little bit cuter, I guess. So I did some stripes on his. I'm doing some polka dots on this little jean dress. For the girl on the right hand side, I'm actually using a souffle pen, which they also call embossing pens. And this is a way that you can use colors on top of other colors. They dry opaque. So those are super fun to play with. I like to outline all of my images, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. The last thing that I'm going to do is use this silver gel pen to color in the headlamp and the stethoscope so that it would look metallic. I'm going to put all my dies in place, and then I'm going to go ahead and run this through my Big Shot to cut them all out. I did kind of take care to make sure the dies weren't directly next to each other so I would have good pressure. I'm also cutting the tag out of the backgrounds we created. Here I have just a couple of different colors, different like strips of color. This is the Blue Violet from Simon Says Stamp. All of the products are always linked on the blog. So if you're ever wondering what I use, please head over there to check that out. I'm going to do some heat embossing for the sentiments. So I treated that with my embossing bag, and then I'm stamping in Versamark ink. I'm going to go ahead and use some white embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp. Flick off the extra and then just heat set that until it is smooth and melted. I use the same colors to cut out the sections, like the little hole protectors for the tags so that they would coordinate. I'm going to put those on with Tombow Mono Multi Glue. And then I have some black and white baker's twine that I am going to use. I just like to fold my string in half, loop it through, and then bring the two ends through the loop. I'm going to put down this, like I said, watercolor paper. I'm going to put this down on my card base, but I am not going to adhere my tag flat. First of all, it would be a little weird with the twine behind it, but I do want them to kind of pop up from the background. So I'm using Scotch foam tape to go ahead and do that. Just going to pull that off, and I am going to put it centered, though you could put like colored paper behind it and do them kind of offset, and that would be totally adorable. For the little animals, I wanted the one in the background to be flush, so I'm just putting foam tape where it's going to hang over. I'm adhering the rest of that little doggy with Scotch foam tape, and I built all of them the same. I'm only showing you one, but I did build all of them the same. For the dog that's going to be in front, the little sick puppy that's on the pillow, I'm going to pop him up on foam tape, and then this is the only one I had to do double foam on. I'm going to be honest. The other ones I was able to make it work with just one level of foam tape, but I couldn't get it as close to this dog as I wanted to, so I did end up adding the second piece of foam tape to pop it up even more, but this is the only one I had to do that with. So once I have that down, I'm going to kind of arrange my string. I like to just kind of tuck them in place next to whatever it is that I'm doing. In order to fix their little eyes, I am going to use black Nuvo drops so that they actually have eyeballs again, and one is not a pirate and one has no eyes. And then on all of them, I used the Morning Dew clear Nuvo drops just to kind of accent each sentiment. So this is each card built. I put the little kitty with the broken leg on there, and the little sentiment says, it's a tough break, but you're tougher, which is totally encouraging and adorable. Oh, I did use the bad case of missing you, probably because I just think it's so cute. And then one of them, I didn't even use any of the animals. I just used the three kids together and thought that that was just super cute. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope that you learned something and that you'll give this technique a try, and I will catch you next month for the next video. Bye.